and he believes that it's kind of a conspiracy paranoia, but could it be that these people who had all this incredible stress in their lives, all of a sudden they land up in jail where there's a lot less stress, and all of a sudden they develop these cancers. So this whole life that is outside of this book, I think this book helps us begin to see that it's not just what the government has told us about the Kennedy assassination. I think one of the reasons we didn't have a lot of festivity or any, not festivity, but any investigation, because people were afraid of the truths that would come out. We already have, Kennedy is not the man today that he was when he died. We know a heck of a lot more about him. We know that he shared girlfriends with organized crime guys. He shared girlfriends with a lot of guys. And so there's, but the one thing that I grew up never connecting until a few years ago when a friend of mine who's the police chief gave me the records that the federal government told me I was entitled to, but that the previous administrations of my town said I could not have. And I got access to those records, and that's when I made the connections. And last summer I met with the last living investigator who said, you don't have to look anymore. I mean, it's interesting when people are, one time I went to the biggest gangster in Chicago, this guy Tony Accardo, and we had lunch, and I asked him, I had a theory about who killed my father. And he said, why do you want to go back into that stuff? This is, it's the past, you're going to get all dirty, you don't want to do that. He said, so finally I kept bugging him. He says, look, I'm going to tell you this once, I'm never going to tell you this again. I'm not going to say he did it, but I'm not going to say he didn't do it. So this is the way these guys speak. And I think this is the key to understanding this mentality of the way these guys speak. Carlos Marcello is there are people who claim to have heard him say, I did it, I did it. I got to get rid of this stone in my shoe, and so on. This incredibly rich culture, which a lot of people don't know much about, unless you came up inside of it. I mean, you're certainly not going to learn about it from the outside, watching the films, especially the films of Scorsese and Coppola. You'll learn probably a little bit more through those films than some of the outsiders' films. But you're going to learn a heck of a lot more about it through Carlos Marcello, the man behind the JFK assassination. Certainly he was involved. Certainly he wasn't the only one who wanted Kennedy assassinated. But his story, I mean, when I was reading this, when I first picked up the book, I said, oh, we're going to have another one of these Kennedy things. But really, it's the story of an immigrant. Carlos Marcello could have been any immigrant that came to the United States. How he ended up where he did is all a matter of the different choices he made. And what we find in this book is this path that he follows where he makes this decision instead of that decision, this decision instead of that decision. And let me tell you, I just recently edited a book of short stories by the guy who was one of the key lawyers of Tony Accardo in Chicago. He was the big head of. He was the Carlos Marcello of Chicago, and this guy Bernard Bruno, who's Sicilian, comes from the same town that Tony Accardo did, and they were very good friends. Only Tony Accardo was actually, he never went to jail. He was indicted. And Barney Bruno, who was his lawyer, somebody had to represent him, had experiences with Robert Kennedy, and he writes about Robert Kennedy in his book. And he talks about Robert Kennedy being a bully, being a punk, a bully, bothering people. And if they couldn't bother Tony Accardo, he went and bothered Tony's brother-in-law, who was his gardener. They were trying to get the gardener for IRS problems because his brother-in-law paid him cash to do his, and so they were trying to threaten Tony Accardo because they couldn't get to him. And there was incredible bullishness of Kennedy's, Bob Kennedy. And we find the same thing in the story here. He just would not let go. Now, why